Why is it important to learn these things? This is to have visually interesting shots, guys. We will give, I suppose, as well, what we're going to go through is vital storytelling tools. Things like angles, framing. All of these things really have an effect on how we tell our story or how we communicate our story using visuals to our audience. And as well, obviously, we all want to create better and more entertaining films. Is that right? That's kind of why we're all here? Brilliant. Exactly. And we're going to do that together, guys. Right? So let's jump into the lesson, guys. So what I want to first talk about is aspect ratio. Does anybody know what that is or what it means? It's perfectly okay if it's very new for you. Okay? A couple of yeses coming in, a couple of unsures. Guys, aspect ratio is basically, or to simply put it, it is the width and the height of an image or a screen. Okay? So it's the width and height of the image or the screen. All right? Now, William Kennedy Dixon, guys, he would have worked with Thomas Edison on improving the motion picture. Okay? So Kennedy was really experimenting with film, trying to figure out what the best aspect ratio was, so what the best width and height would be. So he landed on 4 perforations high. And what I mean by perforations, guys, can you see here on the film strip in the middle, we've got these little holes on the side. And it's 4, they're called perforations, and it's 4 perforations high. So what happened is around this time, guys, the Motion Picture Patent Company decided that this would be the standard for films being shot in the US from 1909. So this is a little bit of the history, and this is really, really interesting, guys. And the aspect ratio stayed relatively the same until this guy showed up. So when TV arrived into most people's homes, guys, cinema took a huge hit, okay? So it needed to do something to get viewers back into the seats. And can anybody tell me what they did or what happened next to get viewers from the small screen back to the big screen? Okay? Jonas, not really. You're kind of on the right track. Heather, brilliant, gold star, first in, guys. Widescreen. Okay? A film premiered 1952 on September the 30th in widescreen. It was the first ever widescreen movie. And at the time, it was known as Cinerama. Okay? The aspect ratio, unlike 4 perforations high, it was 2.59. Okay? In terms of its decimal or how we write it down. Okay? But guys, the important thing to note here is that this sparked a war of the widescreens for many, many years. So the aspect ratio shifted slightly throughout this time because many different production companies were coming up with their own method. Okay? So that's a little bit of the brief history. But how did we land on 16:9? Where did we get this from? Because as we all know, this is the modern day aspect ratio. You'll find that most TVs, most cameras, pretty much anything that records is going to come with the default setting of 16:9. So where did we get this? And it wouldn't be until the influence of cinema's little brother, television, again, that they had to change things up. It was when they were drawing the plans for the first HD television. They needed to come up with something
I'm going to show
new,
you how to make your live
okay?
streams look
So
perfect.
what they did, an engineer by the names of Kearns H. Power came up with a compromise for the aspect ratio for the new HD TV. He landed on 16:9, guys. And what it was a compromise between the 2 extremes that cinema or that aspect ratio had been through. So it took the 1.33 or 4.6, 4 perforations high of the silent era. This was the aspect ratio of the silent era. And then when CinemaScope came in, 2.35. What happens is, guys, 16:9 is a perfect geometrical balance between the 2 extremes, from the first early days of cinema to widescreen. Okay? So that's basically how they came up with it, guys. Or that's how we landed on that today. So before we even begin to consider how we are going to frame our shot or how we're going to compose our shot, we first need to consider the aspect ratio. So aspect ratio is a fundamentally simple concept. It has a very deep history, guys. It's very, very fascinating. I'm not going to go into it really heavily anymore. We don't want to take up too much time. But if you're interested in this, guys, there's a lot of information out online, and it's very, very interesting. But the important thing now to understand is that 16 by 9 is the default. Now, I would urge you guys to shoot 16 by 9 all of the time, unless you're trying to go for a different style. So unless you maybe want to shoot something that looks like the silent era, you need to go with the aspect ratio of that time. Does that part make sense, guys, of why aspect ratio is important? It's important to be able to, I suppose, envision our ideas and to shoot accordingly, okay? So moving on, guys, from that, let's talk about framing. Framing is a huge part of shooting excellent footage, guys, that looks professional. And it can be a great tool as well to help you tell your story. I can't tell you, there's such a different, even the array of framings that we see on screen, they all have different messages, they all have different meanings, and they communicate that to us visually. So we need to understand these and use these tools. So there are many different ways to really frame a subject. And again, as I say, they have different meanings, different emotional weights. They can be very, very suggestive. And they can really give us an idea into our character's thought or our subject's thought. Apologies, I left that part out. The last point there, guys, gives us an idea into our subject's thoughts or frame of mind or emotions. Okay? So there's 6 main types of framing that I want you to familiarize yourself with. And before I put them on screen, guys, I need to mention that the names of these can be different depending on a production company if you're working with, or your country, or your language. Sometimes the names can be slightly different. So a quick tip, if you're working with other people, is to really consult with them and see what they call it, okay? So we've got the full or the wide shot. We've got a medium full shot, a medium shot, medium close-up, and extreme close-up. So some of these, guys, they might be familiar to you. Some of them, they might be new. Were you familiar with at least 1 or 2 of these, guys? Would 1 or 2 of these been, I suppose, you're familiar with and you've used or thought about? Kim says all of them, brilliant. Lucian says most. Sarah, they're relatively new. Perfect, guys, perfect. And look, we're going to break them down individually. So these guys are indicators of where we should want to position our frame or where we want to crop the frame. So we're going to use our lovely model here on the left, and we're going to go through each of them differently, okay? So first of all, what we're going to look at is the full wide, okay? Just see, guys, that the subject fits nicely in the frame, okay? So it really allows the audience to see the subject in the environment around him or her, okay? So see how there's nice space between the feet and the end of the frame, and there's also nice space between the top of our subject's head and the top of the frame. So this shot itself, it doesn't really carry a huge amount of emotional weight, okay? It's usually just to introduce characters into our scene. So the full shot would have been very, very popular in early cinema, and it was until really directors found the power of medium shots and close-ups, okay? So the point that I've highlighted here, guys, because I wanted you to really remember this, the introduction of the character is crucial to how we feel about the character, okay? Sometimes for the entire movie, and slight changes will change how we feel about that character. So it's very, very important to realize that the first time you introduce your character is very, very important. So guys, what I want to use as an example here for the full wide shot. Now hopefully this is smooth for everybody. This is a movie called The Big Lebowski. So what I want you guys to see or recognize here. So the wide shot allows us to see the character in his environment, giving us an insight into the type of person he is, the type of places he goes, the way he dresses in these types of places, really give us an indicator to who this character is, without even saying a word, guys. Does this man, to me, with this, he looks a little bit of a slacker, He's not really dressed. He's almost in his pajamas or his nightwear. He doesn't seem like he takes life all too seriously. He's wearing glasses indoors. This is the power, guys, of visual communication. Are you guys getting that from what you're looking at? Yeah, brilliant, guys, brilliant. All right, let's go through a couple more. So let's talk about the medium shot, guys. So what I want for you to notice here is, or something to take note of, is you don't cut off the subject's joints. Not physically, obviously, so don't get worried, but you need to crop above the knees, not on the knees, never on the elbows. You need to be aware of that, guys, because it confuses the audience. It seems like they are missing a limb. But just to take note here, guys, just above the knees, we're still leaving room over the head. And guys, this is very, very useful for like dialogue scenes, group shots. It would be one of the most common shots that's used in films, or takes up the most amount. Okay? And let's have a look at an example of this. This is a great movie, Fight Club. So, guys, I'm sure you're starting to notice now we're getting much closer to the characters. Okay? This shot is bringing us into their world. We're starting to see less of the environment, and we're becoming closer to them, their conversations, their emotions, their expression, their relationship. So can you see, guys, that visually they're telling completely different stories from two different shots, giving us small little messages and indicators, okay? And this is important that we understand this, because this helps us to tell our story. And that's why we are here. We want to make entertaining movies, guys. So the better that you communicate with your audience, the better they will understand it, and most likely the more they will enjoy it, okay? So does everyone with me so far? Brilliant. Good stuff, guys. A lot of you seem to be really, really enjoying this, so that's really good news. So, guys, moving closer again, the medium close-up, okay? So again, we're seeing less of the environment, getting much closer into the subject. Now, what you'll notice here, guys, is you'll just crop above the waist, around the belly button area, around the stomach area, okay? But notice again, nice room above the head, okay? And again, just bringing us closer to our characters or our subject's emotional state. So it'll be heavily used in movies, it'll be heavily used in documentaries as well, guys. It might be something that you want to use for an interview shot. The reason being is because we're starting to get close, we're starting to get intimate with the subject. So what I want you to notice here, guys, watch how the camera angle switches out. We see the environment. I'm going to let that come around again. So just try to take note, guys, of when the shot moves to a wide shot, we see the environment, we see where they are. We have an idea of where this is taking place. There we go. And then back in, straight back into the action. We're interested in what that person's saying. So the use of the two shots here, guys, again, I'm sure you're starting to see how we can use these really to direct our audience's attention or to bring them back to the action. Okay? So, next, guys, I want to speak about the close-up. The close-up, it's very, very powerful, okay? Again, we're almost like getting under the subject's skin. The subject will take up the majority of the frame. There's a lot of emphasis on emotion here, guys. And again, it's creating an intimate connection between the audience and the subject, okay? And I want to show you guys a music video of how close-ups are used excellently, okay? Now, this is the Foo Fighters, guys, a song called The Pretender. Now, what I want you to notice here is the use of close-ups. We can't even hear the music, guys, but with the use of close-ups, it's setting the emotion, it's setting the intensity. Imagine how much more, or how I suppose it'd be much more intense with the music as well. So is everybody kind of understanding where I'm trying to bring you, or the direction, or what I'm trying to show you guys? Is everybody with me? Is everyone on board? Brilliant. Good stuff, guys. Good stuff. So again, really, really useful, guys. You can show a lot of emotion. You can show a lot of intensity with the use of the close-up. And now what we're going to speak about is the extreme close-up. Okay? So, again, guys, this is known as well as the detailed shot. and obviously the name giving it away, it's giving us immense amount of detail or showing us an immense amount of detail. It can show us hidden emotions that we might not have seen from the medium shot or the wide shot, okay? It can also show hidden intentions. You can also use it to show a lot of detail with objects. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a person, okay? So, guys, like even with this shot, this image on screen, if we were to imagine if this was a movie, you know, without seeing everything else, this could be a nervous biting of the nails, maybe. Maybe we might not have seen that from the outside, but once we're brought in, Lucian, I'm not going to read that out loud, you know, and we might not have seen this. We might not have thought that there was any emotion or that the character was hurting or nervous or happy. Whatever it is, guys, we might not notice from the outside. But once you go to the extreme close-up or the close-up, we're getting close to that. And we can reveal that to the audience. Okay? So what I want to show you is an example of a movie. And if you have not seen it, guys, I would highly, highly recommend it. It's called American Psycho. Okay? And I really want you guys to try dissect or to really notice the use of the extreme close-up. Okay, in this movie, it was executed fantastically. Okay, so really, to give you an idea, our character here is a serial killer, and it's known from the start of the movie. So I'm not giving you guys any spoilers, but the genius thing in this movie is the use of the wide shot. It's almost, we don't know that this guy, we don't know his inner killer. We don't know all the terrible things he has done. And he thinks from the wide shot, the director is almost using that as how his co-workers see him or how the people around him see him. That they don't see him for what he really is. But for moments in the movie, when the director uses the extreme close-ups, look at the intensity, guys. We can see the sweat dripping from the face. Okay? A murderous look. And guys, even with the audio, I wanted to leave the audio out because I want to speak over. When they go to the extreme close-ups, we hear the thoughts in his head of what he wants to do. He's a deranged killer. The only times we see this is through the use of the extreme close-up. So what I would say is for anyone who hasn't seen American Psycho, to definitely jump into that. Okay? So guys, that's framing, and there's the types of framing that we deal with. Now what I want to talk about are some of the common mistakes, and mainly 3 common mistakes that we'll make when framing a shot. So, too much headroom, too little headroom, and cutting off of limbs. Okay? So for anybody who is not familiar with headroom, don't worry, that's absolutely fine. Guys, headroom is the space that you leave between the top of the subject's head and the top of the frame. So I like to think of it, or I like to call it, breathing space. And the reason being, guys, is because if you don't have enough of it, it can almost look like we're very claustrophobic. The shot can look very cramped. Now, in my opinion, with this shot, there's too much headroom. There's too much space between the top of his head and the top of the frame. It almost looks like he's sinking. And that's what I kind of mean.